Okay, so we are going to go over the review for the test for Unit 3, Test 2. So perpendicular and parallel for numbers 1 and 2. Perpendicular, we know that the slope must be the opposite reciprocal. So if my slope right now is -3, the opposite reciprocal of that is going to be a positive 1/3. And it goes through the point of 9, 2. So now I can just use my point slope formula to figure out the equation of that line. Remember, equation of a line should end up in y equals mx plus b form. So if I plug that in, I have y minus 2 equals 1/3 and then x minus 9. Distribute, and I end up with y minus 2 equals 1/3 and or 1/3 x minus 3, because a third of 9 would be 3. And then I'm going to add 2, and that's really hard to see there. So when I do that, I end up with y equals 1/3 x minus 1. And that would be perpendicular to that one and goes through the point of 9, 2. And I could double check it by putting in my calculator and seeing if it goes through that point. All right, so this one we needed to be parallel through this one. So here's the thing. I need to have my actual slope. So to do that, I need to solve for y to get that. And so when I do that, I subtract 2x. So 4y equals -2x plus 12. Divide by 4 on both sides. So y equals -1/2 x plus 3, but the only thing we care about is this -1/2. That's the only thing we care about, and it goes through the point of 8, 2. So my m is -1/2 and goes through the point of 8, 2. So y plus 2 equals -1/2 x minus 8. And I can distribute. Y plus 2 equals -1/2 x plus 4 now, because the -1/2 times -8. Subtract 2 from both sides, and I end up with y equals -1/2 x plus 2. So that would be parallel to this original equation and goes through the point of 8, -2. Moving on to number 3, create an equation that is parallel and an equation that's perpendicular to this line. So the thing with this line is, all I need to find an equation that's parallel and perpendicular is the slope. So if I start here, I can figure out my slope is -1, 2, 3, +4. So my m for this one is -3/4. So if it's parallel, so if I need one that's parallel, oh, that didn't write very well. If I need one that's parallel, the slope has to be the same. So I could say y equals -3/4 x plus, let's do 2. As long as it's not the original point, then we're fine for being parallel. Because if it's the original point, it's the same line. So this part has to be different. If I need perpendicular, so as long as you have this y equals -3/4 x and you don't have +3, you've got one that is parallel to it. As far as perpendicular, remember it needs to be an opposite reciprocal. So y equals, well, the opposite of -3/4 would be a positive, and the reciprocal would be 4/3. So I need 4/3 x, and this one could be absolutely anything. I could say +3 because it's going to be perpendicular to it. I could say -7. I could say +0 and leave it off. So any of those will work. I'm going to just say -1 for this example. But as long as you have the 4/3 x and whatever else you have after that, that's going to be just fine. Okay. Find the formula that can be used. So we need the formula and find the 30th term of the pattern. So if I take a look, this is changing by going up 2 every time. So we've got a 2x. Actually, I'm going to use the n because it is nth term. So 2n. And then if I back up, I end up with -7. So 2n minus 7 would be our formula that we need. And if I want to know the 30th term, I just plug in the 30 here. So I would take 2 times 30 minus 7, and I end up with 53 when I put that into the calculator. For the next one, I'm going up 10 every time. Okay, so up 10. So I've got 10x here. No, I don't. I have 10n because I'm going to use an n because it's the nth term. And then to back it up, to go one before, I would have to end up with 50. So 10n plus 50. To find the 30th term, I would take 10 times 30 and then plus 50. And if I plug that into my calculator, I end up with 350. Okay? And then number 6. So number 6 looks like this. I'm going down -3 every time. So -3, -3, -3 every time. So I've got -3n. Whoops. Oh, no, it did right. Ha, that's really funny. -3n. And then if I back it up and add 3, going the opposite way, I would have 98 here beforehand. So plus 98. So I would plug in -3 times 30 plus 98, and my calculator would tell me that that is equal to 8, and that is right on. Okay, number 7. F of x goes through -1, 6, and 1, 12. G of x goes through 3, -4, and is parallel to f of x. Find the equation of g of x. So what we need from f of x is just the slope. So f of x, my slope, the m, is going to be the 12 minus 6 over 1 minus -1, so plus 1, or 6 over 2, which is equal to 3. And if it's parallel, we're going to use the same slope. So we're going to use the m equals 3, and we're going to go through the point of 3, -4. So now I can plug it in to be y plus 4. Equals 3x minus 3, or y plus 4 equals 3x minus 9. And then I can subtract 4 from both sides. So y equals 3x minus 13. So my g of x is going to be, and so I just replaced y, 3x minus 13. That's parallel to that first one, and goes through the point of 3, -4. For this second one, number 8, it's perpendicular to f of x. So it goes through 6, -2, 11, 8. Its g of x is perpendicular and passes through -14, -7. So we're going to follow the same process, only we're going to change our slope up because it's not parallel. So my slope for f of x, we're going to take, that doesn't equal, this is the m, would equal 8 minus -2, or 8 plus 2, all over 11 minus 6, or 10 over 5, which equals 2. But my slope for the new one is going to be different. It's going to be the opposite reciprocal. So opposite would be negative, reciprocal would be 1/2. And it goes through the point of -14, -7. So now I'm ready to plug it in. And we're going to have y plus 7 equals 1/2. No, it's -1/2. X plus 14. So I distribute to have y plus 7 equals -1/2 x minus 7. So if I subtract 7, those don't disappear like originally maybe you thought. So y equals -1/2 x minus 14. So just replace the y with the g of x. So g of x would equal -1/2 x minus 14. And that would be the answer that we need. So this one here was parallel. That one is perpendicular. All right. Coming down to 9, 10, 11, and 12. Here's what we're going to use. We're going to use this equation right here to answer those 4 questions. And I didn't want it to hide in all of that. So here we go. For number 9, we are looking for an equation that is steeper than this line. So if it's 3, if my slope is 3, I need it to be more vertical. So that means I've got to go up more. So as long as I choose something that's greater than 3, it could even be 3.5, but something that's greater than 3, it's going to be steeper. So y equals 4x minus 2. y equals 5x minus 2, any of those are going to work. So as long as your new slope is greater than 3, we are good to go with that. Number 10, create an equation that is flatter than the line above. So if it's going to be not as steep, it's got to be, the slope has to be less than 3. So we could say even y equals 2x minus 2. We could say y equals just x minus 2, 1/2 minus x minus 2. All of those would make it flatter than the original equation as long as our slope is less than 3. Number 11, create an equation that is shifted higher than the line above. So we're looking at the y-intercept. It crosses right now at -2. That's what that's saying right there. And so we need it to shift up. So anything that on a graph that's higher than -2. So I'm just going to make it extreme, and I'm going to say y equals 3x plus 5. And so I actually shifted it up 7 because -2 up to 5 would be, or positive 5 would be up 7. So I shifted it up quite a bit. You could have something as long as it's greater than -2. Okay, it would be shifted higher than that one. And number 12, create an equation that is shifted lower than the line above. Well, again, now we're dropping it. We're going lower or down. So 3x, and I'm going to make it pretty obvious, so minus 5. Okay, I don't know why it changed colors, but it did. As long as your value, your y-intercept value is less than -2, you've got it taken care of. All right, so this was the front page, part 1. You can find part 2 attached as well. To be continued.